often, even chronically, right? And you're not going to know that unless you give them the benefit of the doubt and start asking some questions about that. So the last step then is to rewrite that story. Realize that the story you're telling yourself is either all about you or makes up some story about all these things this person is doing or why they're doing it. Rewrite that story a little bit and get curious about what might be some other good reasons. Now, it's entirely possible there will be no good reasons, but this is a good place to start. You're going to get a lot further than if you start in the spot where you've made up your story and you're going in with that. Okay? So reflect, remember, rewrite. Now we're going to plan. And this has to be one of the most important things in a hard conversation. And I realize it sounds like, oh my gosh, seriously, we're going to have a spreadsheet now, we're going to plan all this stuff. A lot of these things happen on the fly, and that's true. But you can also do this relatively quickly. So you want to be able to know what you're going to accomplish, let go of your need to control. Does that give anyone pains? And decide when and where you're going to meet. So you got to have some things in order for this to go well. So, know what you want to accomplish. It does not have to be major. When you go into a meeting for a hard conversation, you need to know what success looks like in order to know whether you achieve that. Now, if you're going into a meeting that you want that person to tell you you were right, or that you have all the answers, or that you're the boss, or whatever, you might want to rethink what your focus is for that meeting. I mean, maybe that is what you need to do. But likely not. It's probably something like, I need to ask for help. I need to end your job today. I need you to realize that this is your warning and that there will be other consequences if this behavior continues. I need you to know that you have to move out. Okay, so it doesn't mean that that thing occurs necessarily by the end of the meeting, but you need to get clear on what the takeaway is going to be from that meeting. What do you want this person to realize? Because how many times do you go into a meeting and you have a big conversation, especially when it's something tough, and they leave and you think, well, we didn't get to the thing that I meant to talk about, and now I have to do this again. So you need to be clear so that you can stay on track. You also need to let go of the idea that you can control the outcome. So when you're making up this story about how this is going to go and you're making up your plan and you're deciding that the person's going to throw chairs or that the cops are going to be there or whatever it is, or I'm going to say this and then they're going to say this and then I'll say this and I have this chart and no, you're not going to be able to control that. It's not going to be perfect and it's never going to be comfortable. There's no one right way to do a hard conversation. There's a lot of wrong things that we can avoid, but there's no one right way to do it. And it's actually the imperfection that makes the connection stronger. So when you go into a meeting and someone has to talk to you about something difficult and they're kind of struggling, but they're really honest with you about how they're feeling or what has to happen or whatever, are you more likely to listen than if they come in and say, well, I know you're thinking this, and I know this is the other thing, and here's all this information, bury them in something. You don't open up the door for a conversation. So let go of your need to control and know what's going to happen. It's going to be a mystery, and it may surprise you. So one of these conversations I can give you an example of is I worked at the International Studies office at MSUB. So it was my job to bring students in from overseas and help monitor their progress while they're here, because there's a bunch of federal regulations about if you're here on a visa for school, you have to do well, you have to go to class, all the things that a good student must do. And if you don't do those things, you have to leave. You have to go home. So essentially, it's my job to kick you out of the country if you don't comply. Well, that's not ideal. So I have this student who I've dealt with a lot. He's great, I really like this guy, and he's doing terribly in school. And we've done all the remedial things that we can do to get him back up to speed, and he's not getting there. So now I have to have this conversation with him that he needs to pack his bags and leave the country as soon as possible. And I think, oh, this is terrible. And I'm trying to figure out how I can avoid having the conversation by fixing this problem. But I make the appointment for him to come in because I have to. I have no idea what I'm going to say. And I have no idea why I asked him a question, but I did. And I'm so thankful. And I've tried many times since then to remember this situation. He came in and he sat down at my desk. And I said, do you know why we're meeting today? And he said, I'm not doing very well in school. And I said, right. And you know, if you're not doing very well, that you have to go home. I was like, yep. I said, do you want to go home? And he was like, yeah, I do. Well, I could have spent a whole lot of time trying to fix this and he wouldn't have said anything. He didn't know what to do. He was homesick. He's 18 years old and he wants to go back home, clear across the ocean. It was hard for him to have that conversation, and I was trying to fix it so that that wouldn't be, because of course he wouldn't want to go home, right? He's going to want to stay here in college where things are great and fun. No, but I asked him, and I would have had no idea that that was going to happen. So asking the question, and we'll talk about that, asking the question is a really powerful way to start these conversations. Now you're also going to want to think about where you want this meeting to be. Depending on how difficult the conversation is, you might want to pick a neutral area, and I don't mean neutral in color. I just realized that as I was putting this. Not neutral in color, the design not so much matters. But you want it to maybe not be your office, maybe not be their office. Let's pick a central place where we can have this meeting. It's ideal if you can sit adjacent or next to this person, particularly if these are heated kinds of conversations. Now, of course, there are times when you will have conversations that will put you at risk, and you need to pay attention to that. If you need to have another person there, if you need to make sure you have access to the door, that's certainly possible, and you need to think about those things. But I think we could all agree that the vast majority of our hard conversations are not that. So pick a room that's sort of central, easy to get to, private. You're not going to want to start this conversation in the middle of a group, and you're not going to want to be interrupted. So you want it to be a place that you can close the door, have your conversation, take care of business, and be done. All right, so planning stage is, you know what you want to accomplish. You know you need to have the conversation from the assessment phase, right? You don't need to control the outcome. This is going to be the hardest one to get used to. And you know where the meeting will be. Seems pretty logical, right? All right, so now we get to meet. The moment you've all been waiting for. I told a person about this conversation, and he was a psychology major, and he was saying, this sounds like counseling. It's totally counseling. It's totally the same idea. So when a person comes in, offer them a seat, make sure they have what they need. We're going to be here for a little bit, usually, in a hard conversation, right? So make sure they're comfortable. There's no reason that we can't be respectful and make sure that a person has what they need. Sit adjacent to them, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. It's so much easier to have a conversation and to open up if you are adjacent or next to someone rather than behind a desk. And we tend to want to sit behind a big desk because that's protection for us, right? It distances us from this thing that we do not want to do. But it's actually a lot more productive if you can sit next to or adjacent to a person. Use some open posture, forward your phone, or silence it. Ask them to do the same. It's time to focus on what we're doing. And then drop the armor. And this is hard too, because we've been holding this armor up for a really long time. It might be a little rusty at the elbows. This stuff is heavy, and you don't want to put it down. And it feels really weird to tell someone what you really think. An example that comes to mind for me is I worked for a nonprofit. And the nonprofit was struggling. We had this meeting where several people had been fired, and there were probably 20 or 30 of us in this room. And the director is saying, all right, so these people have been fired, and here's what's happening, and it was all business, business, business. What do you think everybody else in the room was thinking?
Am I next?
Yep, am I next? We never talked about that. We never talked about the fact that the director had no idea what to do. We never talked about that she would back us no matter what we were going to have to do here in the next amount of time, or that we were in it together, or any of those things that you want to hear. So now I don't know if I'm going to be fired. It seems that the director is not afraid at all, and I am, and I'm going to need some help here. But she didn't want to drop that armor to let us know. She was trying to be the strong director who has it under control.